think I will just get going. There are still a few participants joining, but let's just get going. So thank you so much for joining everyone to this webinar. Today we will be touching upon the topic of supplier collaboration and of course the importance of this and why it's so important. Diving into the agenda firstly, I will do a brief introduction of just where we are, lay the landscape of where we are. Then we will talk a bit about the challenges that there are and why it's so challenging in terms of supplier collaboration. Then we'll dive into the key to successful collaboration. What are some of the good ways to work with collaborations and why are those so important? Briefly talk a bit about certifications and why those are also of great importance in the collaboration. And then Rege will join me as well. She will be talking a bit about the role of PLM when we talk about supplier collaborations. And then I have the utmost pleasure of introducing our two guests today. They will join later on in this discussion where we will have a Q&A with them. It is Anders from Knowledge Cotton, and then it is Ranga as well from joining us from India, Dibella, India, and they will be talking to me and answering a bit of questions about this topic. On the practical note, if you have any questions during this, either during our presentations or during the Q&A, just pop your questions in the chat, and then I will either answer them during or afterwards in the Q&A, depending on the question topic, and of course, if it fits in with any of the speakers. Both Anders, Rege, and Ranga will be there throughout the session, so they will be able to answer any questions, whether it's related to PLM or the role of supplier and brand. So let's get going. All right. So the first question I've kind of put up here is one of the things that we hear a lot from many of the brands, both small and bigger brands out there and textile companies working with suppliers and working with partners, is the very difficult way of how to respond to the many inquiries, both from major retailers, but of course also for upcoming legislation in regards to things like due diligence, supplier mapping, and here also social audit reports. And diving into this, talking a bit about growing demands for documentation, because that is in a sense what the whole thing is about. There is right now, both from legislation in terms of product passport, what we've seen in the EU strategy, and what will throughout the coming years become legislation in the EU. There will be demands for this product passport, which will mean that you will, as a brand, have to put information in your garments, in your products, so that they can show the end consumer and the retailers information about this. There will also be upcoming legislation in regards to supply chain transparency, mapping your supply chains, and ensuring that you are aware of where your products are coming from. I'll get back to that as well a bit later in the next slide. There is, as I said, also major retailers having these demands as well, and they already have these demands because as of very soon, they will have to report on their due diligence process. And what we see is that there is this growing demand for the brands and textile companies that this demand will go throughout the chain. So a retailer will ask their brand, which is their closest supplier. And of course, that will also mean that the brand and the textile company will then also be asking for the same demands throughout their chain. which means that once you have to deliver on this, you have to deliver on these demands and these requirements, you will need to have this documentation. It becomes very vital for all brands to collect it. Firstly, from their tier one, from their direct supplier, and then, of course, throughout the supply chain, it will be expected of their tier ones to be able to collect this documentation. That also means that there is a real big requirement from these suppliers in terms of engagement. They will need to engage in this process, engage in this documentation that is needed so that the brands can ensure that they are compliant with both the legislation, but also the asks from their major retailers and customers. Now, looking at why it's so important in terms of documentation and why it's reliant on this very close collaboration is, of course, looking at a supply chain like this, like illustrated. So this is an illustration of how a chain can look. There can be more links. There is often more links, but of course there can also be a fewer. Depending on which type of supply chains that the brands are working with. But what it shows is that there is this need for documentation throughout the supply chain. The transaction certificates, if it's a certification, is what validates the chain of custody throughout the chain of the fiber from the beginning of the farm until it hits the retailers. Now, if you look at why this is so important and relies on the collaboration, the problem is that changing suppliers frequently and not having these long-term commitments with the suppliers and with the partners that you're working with is that the transaction certificate, as an example, is not something that is collected from when you place the order. It is not something that is collected when you create the style or you place the order, but it's actually something that is afterwards when the order is shipped, which means that there is a long process that you have to have this engagement with your suppliers, needing for this documentation to ensure that you can report and document the saying that, for example, if you say that you are organic, that the garment that you have produced is organic, the documentation for that is needed throughout the chain. So they're very reliant on each other. Both the brand and, of course, the suppliers become really reliant on each other so that this chain doesn't break. And why is this then so difficult? Why is it so difficult to keep these long-term relationships? One of the things, and we've just listed some of the things that are that can be a problem or can create problems in the collaboration, is of course because it is a fast-paced industry. Everything goes very fast. There are many seasons, many collection seasons throughout the year, and thereby, of course, also many styles. A lot of changes during this development can create bad conditions for the people that are making these garments. A lot of changes and, of course, a necessity for cheap prices. That is a very big part of it, and I'll dive into that in a moment as well, because that is really something that we see, that once you really push the suppliers in terms of delivery, in terms of prices, changing a lot throughout, that doesn't make the collaboration between two partners a sustainable one. So you have the necessity to change your suppliers. This becomes a necessity for the brands, that they need to change the suppliers to keep up with the changing needs. And that, of course, is the exact opposite of having these long-term relationships. Now, the consequences of those examples and other than that there is definitely other examples as well, is that it has impact on both the business side and, of course, also the social and environmental impact. Now, if I dive into just some of the ones in terms of business, there is a risk of missing the deadlines, missing the deliveries to the customers. because it disrupts the supply chain when you change something all the time, and you thereby maybe have the necessity to also change a supplier. When you dive into the social impact, but of course, when you have all of these changes, you're pushing the prices a lot. You're pushing the time. The lead time is something that is also always a major factor. When you have this fast-paced industry, a major factor is the lead times. Now, you can imagine that when you have the necessity for it to be produced in 60 days, the factory owner says that it can only be done in 90 days. The result of you pushing towards the 60 days for him to get the order is, of course, that he will maybe turn to a solution of changing facility. And changing the facility, the factory, the location of the production can have the risk of that place not being regulated, that place not being audited, and not living up to the standards that you have as a brand, as a company. It, of course, also has the result of overtime. If you push the time and thereby ask the supplier to produce something in a faster pace than he's actually ready to, the risk of overtime with the workers on the floor is major. The last one is environmental impact. So if you push these terms, if you push the supplier's lead times, is again a really good example of pushing a lead time. The result, of course, is also that you might need to air freight it home. So if you have promised that your goods will be in the stores by whatever date, and then you don't have the time for it to wait with the sea shipment, you will need it to have it within 6 days instead of 6 weeks, which of course has a major impact on the environmental impact of each garment. So these are just some of the consequences that is definitely also suffering when you do not have the mutual relationship, the long-term and mutual relationship with your suppliers. Now, that leads me to the next one, which is, of course, diving into what is then an effective collaboration. And we've kind of divided it up into two different pillars, because one of the ones is the sustainable and mutual beneficial partnership. Now, here I really want to emphasize the fact that this is to underline the importance of the mutual growth, the mutual cultivated relationship where you trust each other to build a long-term relationship. And as a brand, if you grow as a brand, you take your partners with you on this journey. That is a very important. That does make the partnership between you and the supplier, between the brand and supplier, that really does make it a mutual relationship where you gain the respect for each other. An ethical business practice is leading back to what I've already touched upon with the fair margins, realistic timelines, and adherence to business ethics to really ensure that this mutual gain from the business relationship goes both ways. Now, I asked Ranka, just before I dive into intercultural communication, I asked Ranka to give me a quote. When I asked him what he would explain to be a good long-term relationship, and he wrote to me that a long-term brand supplier partnership builds on trust, and shared values are the foundation for improving the livelihoods of small-scale workers, cotton farmers and textile workers, the one that will lead to a more equitable and sustainable fashion industry. Now, I will ask him as well to elaborate on this as well, but I just love the fact that he took into consideration that what you do in your partnership with the brand, as a brand and a factory owner or a supplier, what they do in the partnership has an effect on the entire chain back to the cotton farmer. So that his quote here kind of just underlines the fact that what we do in the brand position and it has an effect of the whole chain of custody back to the farmers. I love that fact. So I'll get him to kind of just dive into that a bit later as well. I also wanted to mention the effective intercultural communication, because I really think that that is something that is so important for the collaboration as well, and understanding each other's cultural differences and respecting them, recognizing that there is a difference, and in the partnership we need to acknowledge it, and ensure that we understand each other and the way that we work, and the differences that there are in the way that we work. The mutual respect is, of course, again, touching upon just an example, could be in terms of calendars. Now, when I wrote this, I definitely thought about the fact that when we sit and do the calendars as a brand, you do the calendar when you want the different collections throughout the year, and you have the timeline for how long does the design take, and so on and so on. But I think when you have the mutual respect for the supplier and he for you, it's also about realizing that you're talking to two different countries. So an example is that adding, as a brand in Denmark or in anywhere that doesn't have those holidays, adding the Chinese New Year and Diwali and so on, adding those things, the Indian holidays and the Chinese ones and the Turkish ones and so on, any production country that you are working with, makes it that much better in terms of planning, so that you don't expect them to ignore their holidays because you have a deadline of 60 days, but you actually respect the fact that they are not supposed to work at those times, just as well as we in Denmark don't work throughout the Christmas holiday and so on. So respecting those mutual differences is so important in the collaboration as well, I feel. And of course, active listening and understanding that there are different ways of communication, and the brand has a very big responsibility to understanding that there is a different way of communicating and engaging with each other when you talk to each other. Yeah. So, and just before I introduce Rikke, I wanted to just briefly also mention that I talked earlier about the chain of custody, and what I think is really important to mention is the significant role of certifications when you work with suppliers, because those are, in a sense, what underlines the way that they can document towards you. So that is the way that when you ask for something in the collaboration, they will be able to document it throughout those certifications that they then have acquired, and that you might as well have required in the process, or technical standards, test results, using the time to do these test results is very much, in many cases, reliant on the suppliers to do that for you. So this is just to underline the importance of the certifications role when you work with suppliers as well. Everyone will get sent out this presentation, and by then you'll be able to scan the QR code, and that will lead you to a landing page on our website where you can see a detailed overview of many of the different certifications mentioned, which just explains how to and why not and why do it, and so on. So you will get that a bit later. But now I would like to introduce Rikke and the PLM's role in supplier and collaboration.
Thank you so much, Anja. I'll do my best to take the supplier collaboration into a perspective of PLM, because this was actually a foundation back when we started the log, that we wanted to create a more equal collaboration between the brand and the supplier, and ensure that the supplier has all the documentation of the process, also in terms of discussing delays and so on, that is often due to a brand making changes. So yeah, that we have done now for a lot of years. But what I will talk about today is, of course, also with the ESG agenda and taking that into consideration. So if you skip to the next slide. This is, maybe you have seen it before. We use it quite often in the dialogues we have, but I think it gives a good overview of what role is PLM having in this future tech stack landscape, because the demand of data is increasing and it will only become worse in the next coming years. So it's quite important that also to think this through together with your suppliers to agree on how will you actually be able to deliver the data that is required from legislation and public reporting, but also to the big key account players you are collaborating with, and that demands this to be able to actually work with you. And just to, we like all these short letter words. I will just quickly explain that the log is a PLM tool. It could also be another PLM tool, not necessarily the log. But we see PLM as kind of the hub or the center of data, collecting information that can then be distributed to your ERP systems, where you can have all your transactions with purchase orders and sales orders and warehouse and finance. And then PIM, which is a product information tool, where all of the soft information that you do not necessarily want in your ERP can be sent, and use a PIM for distributing this data to all of the different marketplaces and your e-commerce. Then below in that value chain of tech solutions, we also see new tools popping up. We have just named it ESG, but it's covering a lot of different things. It's for instance, tools that can calculate the footprint. It could also be a blockchain that can validate the data you have, or it could be a tool that can collect all the transactions you have, because your ERP system do not necessarily cover that need, or the supplier mapping and so on. Then we know, not yet and how, but that there will be some kind of digital product passport that we need to prepare for and start collecting the data. And I see a massive workload here to be able to deliver that. But if we move to the next slide, I have tried to visualize and also just to highlight where I see that you as a company already now can start collecting data, and also talk with your suppliers on with how do we want to collect this. Also because there's a data request from the top, so from the market and from legislation, that will push the brand. And we already see that in the dialogues we have with our customers, that's a huge task, especially for the customer service, to deliver this information. And then that will then impact the product development team and all. But that push is even worse for the suppliers, because they have multiple brands where they need to deliver a lot of the same information. And I think as a brand, we have the responsibility to think through how can we ease the job as a supplier, so they can actually spend time on creating value and changes, and not just reporting information. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the information you need to get from the suppliers. And that is, of course, also from a Deloitte perspective, something we take into consideration in our future roadmap. How can we ease this? Because it's going to be GDPR just 10 times worse. So yeah, it's a huge task, and also something to take into consideration for the future organization and resource planning of who should actually do this. But some of the things that you can already now start to collect is the bill of material. In the log it's called item list. But back in the days when you just did sourcing ready-made garments in China, you could just write on the drawing saying, find some mother of pearl at the local market. That's not an option anymore. That's, of course, really annoying and time-consuming to find out of this information. But it's a little back to how we did it back when we did the CMT, but now with an ESG agenda connected to this. Also, the care instructions is relevant to start to have in an organized way. I foresee with the digital product passport that we will also have to define a repair instruction and also a recycle instruction. So that's also something to take into consideration. And then, of course, collecting all the information you have about the suppliers and the facilities you're working with to have this traceability, and collecting the documentation that Anya referred to in this chain of custody on scope and transaction certificates. And where do you need this data? You need it to be able to calculate your footprint, and that is at least what we expect to be will be a part of the digital product passport, that we get some kind of a score on how well is what is the lifetime of this product and how much impact did it have on the environment, and connected with this LCA calculation of the product. Then you also need to think through how will we validate the data. One thing is we can collect a lot of information, but you can use, we have seen cases where our customers are using a blockchain to do this. You also need to collect it for your future ESG reporting. And right now it's only the big companies who will have to do this from 25. But if you are working with a big company, you would indirectly be requested to fill in this information anyway. And then just on top of this, there could be requests from your key stakeholders for additional information. So I've tried to visualize also in this data feed where the different tools comes into play, and we see the log as this bridge between the brand and the market. And below that, we will have other tools supporting the log. We don't see, or PLM, we don't see that the PLM should solve all of this. That will become a really bad Switzer knife. But on top of this, there will be other tools that are good at distributing this data and make it sufficient in that workflow. Yeah, so that was my little input here. And of course, if you have any questions, you will have the link to my LinkedIn profile, and you're always welcome to reach out if you have any questions or doubts. And I will also join the rest of this webinar and participate in the chat if any questions popping up.
Great. Thank you so much, Rikke. All right. Yep. So moving on to introducing our guests today as well, Ranga from Dibella, India, and Anas from Knowledge Cotton Apparel. So if you could just switch on your your cameras. Thank you so much. So welcome to both of you. I wanted to start off by just asking you to briefly introduce yourselves. If you, Ranga, could start.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sreeranga Rajan, or Ranga. I'm the founder, CEO of Dibella, India. We are an apparel design and manufacturer based in Bangalore, India.
Yeah. Good to see you, Ranga.
Yeah. Just been a week. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, only been a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Anas, and I'm the buying and product manager for the company called Knowledge Cotton Apparel, which mainly produce for male and female. So I mean, we have been invited, Ranga and me, to this seminar or webinar to talk about our partnership. And to be honest, it has actually been a fun journey. I mean, it's always funny to actually raise that question: why are we actually partnering? You know, that's actually a good exercise to do.
Yeah.
You know, step up and look back. So why we're actually partners.
Can you maybe actually elaborate here as well? So why are you partners still with Ranga, and vice versa, of course?
Yeah. But it is a super relevant question. We talked about this actually last week also when Ranga went to Denmark to visit us as well.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, to narrow it down, it very much comes down to the quote that Ranga also mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, that it builds on, you know, on having the same values, not on a, you know, profit scale, but actually on a value based. You know, we the discussion that we have, of course, we discuss production and products. This is what we do, but this is not the main part of our discussion when we talk. It's how to develop, you know, the setup that we have today down on a cotton farming level, and the facilities that we work with, practical things, nerdy things sometimes, but not always on a product level, actually.
That's amazing. Ranga, can you maybe elaborate a bit as well?
Yeah, I think Anders rightly said. So for us, when we talk about why it's been 8 years completed, 9th year we are getting into now. So it started with, what do we have shared values? Are we looking at a common goal? And that is how it started. And and then are you looking to initially when we started, we always look at, okay, is it going to be a transactional relationship, or it is really a long-term collaboration? What is that he's seeking for? And once that is there, that is aligned, it is not just in paper but in any activities that we do. And then we look at, okay, is there a product synergy? Is there a product capability and capacity synergy? And, are we innovating to deliver to the same goal, which is, delivering sustaining impact to the farmers and workers? So like Anders rightly said, we are not running charity. We have tough conversation about, prices and deliveries, very tough conversation. In fact, because, but always the decision has an underlying, fact, which is, how is it going to affect the workers or farmers? And that that comes to business sustainability as well again. So how we can bring a balance between commercial and an impact with the workers and cotton farmers. And for that, the long-term partnership, I think again the key is really the long-term partnership. What the goal we have at the farm level, like Anders and we started discussing quite a lot. And when we talk about innovatives as well, of course, along with the product innovation, what are the other sustainable initiatives we can do? And that always lead to what is our social and environmental impact and how we can reduce it. We can't do a perfect starting now, but if we start now, what is our end goal? That is what the discussion we keep having. And I should say in the past 8 years we have delivered significant impact for the farmers and workers as well. So we are proud of it, because we started when nobody was talking about sustainability or these kind of a long-term partnership and transparency, all that. But now everybody is talking about it, but we are quite proud to say that the journey we have started quite long term back without a lot of fancy words, and we have managed to create significant impact.
Yeah, that's really nice. And as you mentioned, both of you, that Anka, you were here last week in Denmark, so I wanted just to ask you that there is a sense of familiarity between you two as well. And I myself have known Ranka as well for many years. Does that make an importance in the collaboration as well, that you visit each other and so on?
I think, that is important. Personal relationship, whether, in any kind of transaction, whether it is a commercial or personal. But here, since again, the values that we operate on, that really adds to the familiarity.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that I could be transparent. People, when they talk about transparency and traceability, it's a two-way street. Transparency is not just about, okay, you tell me where you're producing your cotton, yarn, and it is transparency is just, and it is a two-way street. We should also know what is happening with the brand, and then what do we do with the transparency? Transparency per se, it's just like showing a mirror. But how we use the data or the information that is derived to transparency, and for that to become effective, there should be a sense of familiarity. Of course, that helps a lot.
Yeah. So I've just added a few questions just to underline the strategic considerations that you have done in relation to long-term partnerships. Anders, can you say something about like the strategic considerations you as a company have done?
Yeah. For those of you that don't know the company, we have which we believe a very high standard when it comes to producing products, and therefore we don't have the luxury just to pick whatever supplier we would like. So for us, when we start up new partnerships, which we don't do that often, we have some standards that we need to reach, and first of all, it's based on having the same values. Because if you want to go through, I think Ranga can maybe also approve that, but if you want to go through a journey like we have been through, if you would have known that journey ahead, maybe you would have chosen differently, because it is a lot of work, and you need to have the same mindset to be able to go through that. So values and mindset are very, key driven when we chose relationships with our partners, because you also touched based on this, Anja, that there is coming some regulation in terms of documentation and data in general, and if you want to achieve that with your partners, it's very important that you align from the beginning, because they can inform you a lot of data, but it also needs to be verified and it needs to be consistent. Yeah. I mean, mindset and value for me is key when starting a partnership.
Great. Ranka, can you maybe also your strategic considerations in Dibella?
I think it is the same, the value and, Anders has told a very important point, which is the consistency. When we talk about having values consistently and the goals consistently, sustainability is not about, okay, today it is a trend to talk about organic cotton. You start with organic cotton. Tomorrow it is on water saving. Then you move to water saving. And it is not, of course it is, there are moving goalposts, but here, unless you have a long-term partnership and a consistent, goal or consistent value on what we want to deliver, both in terms of social and environmental impact, then, it could become dicey. So I totally agree that, the value, and especially when we are having tough conversation, it always helps that, you have the same values. And we have seen generally in the market what is being considered as a tough conversation for us, that is like it happens very quickly. That, and then we move on to, okay, what is the impact it will have on cotton farmers? What will happen if we don't, okay, market condition is not good, if we don't source same as last year, or if we are reducing, what is the impact? How we can ensure that farmers having that security of, purchase, surety of purchase. And so those kind of conversation, quickly it moves into that, rather than only on price, okay, I need 10 cents reduction here, or, these kind of conversations. So I think the shared value and consistent value, or maintaining the consistency of what we are, the impact we are trying to create, is very important. And the other thing also, when we talk about innovation, product innovation, are we adding, from our point as a supplier, when you specifically, we don't want to just sit and wait for a tech pack and for the customer to tell us that, okay, this is what it is, you produce for us. No, we wanted to add value to the product range, unless we don't, because we know we are, we don't want to sell PT product. Our customers are competing with the similar market, which means, with the brands which are not really, choosing the same path that our customers has taken. Our brand, for example, Knowledge Cotton, it would have been so easy for Anas to decide, okay, I need 20% reduction, I can go to any suppliers, and which they can do very easily. In this market, we know that supply is at least 3 times bigger than demand, so it can be done easily. But if Knowledge Cotton decides, okay, this is the path we have to, travel, then how we can add value to that path, in terms of product quality, in terms of our service, because they have to compete in a market which is, much more competitive than our supply base, which means our product quality and lead time and service, what we provide, should be much better than what the conventional industry does. And that is the, to do that, whether that's, again, going back to the value alignment, is very critical. If we have to do that, long-term partnership, very important. It should not be a transactional, say, okay, I want to make, certain margin from each of this product in each of these orders. And because I don't know whether the brand will work with me next year, next season or not. So if you always have that fear and insecurity then you can't really provide the values or impact that you are intending to create, either in the workplace that we are providing for the workers, and also the cotton farmers, the surety of purchase we are giving to the cotton farmers. So these are some of the consideration we really, think deeply and then provide. But of course, Anas have to say whether, we deliver this, what we say, in terms of innovative product and service. But at least from our side, we leave, no stones unturned, to ensure that this is what we are delivering.
Yeah, but that also means that your considerations is not within price reduction. So when you have the collaboration, you're not thinking, not that you're not competitive, but you're not thinking in terms of reducing your prices as much as not, and then not considering what that has an effect on your workers and throughout the chain, as I understand it, right?
Not about reducing prices. I would say it is how we can stay competitive and provide value for what we are, whatever we are being paid, how we can provide value, not just the product value, but additional, value, because whether it is knowledge, any of our customer, they have to compete in the market, and without these values, they won't be able to compete effectively.
True.
And at the end, if they don't grow, we don't grow. And if we don't grow, our farmers, we are not going to deliver any impact to our farmers or workers.
Yeah, and when you work, Anas, and you know that this is the values of Ranka as well, what does that mean for your work as a buying manager?
I mean, the funny part about this is that when you work as deep as, for example, Ranka and I do, we don't talk that much about tech pack from season to season. It's more about the commitment that you actually make to when you have visited, a sewing factory or cotton farm or whatever it is. You're making a commitment to them, and you have to stay true to that path, because otherwise you cannot look each other in the eyes afterwards. So it's just on a much more nerdy level, I would say, and I think one of the things that I really love about our partnership is also that it's more like a strategic plan that we have. It's not from season to season. It is how can we actually develop this going into the future? What opportunities do you have? How do we enlarge our commitment as we do today? So it can sound wrong when we say that we don't focus on products, because of course we do, but it's it's 80% on all the things that happens behind the product, which is important.
Yeah, that sounds good. So moving on to the next question, as I already mentioned as well previously, and Rikke did as well, in terms of the years to come, and everybody is kind of anxious in what will that entail for brands like Knowledge Cotton, and what will that then entail for suppliers like Ranka? So which role will the relationship between a brand and a supplier play when you look at this years to come, Anas? What do you think?
I mean, if you don't have a good partnership today, I think it would be very difficult to provide valid information in the future. Yeah. So it's an essential role in the future. And I mean, we have went from a very manual process to trying to make a more digital universe from our certificates and documentation and supply chain. So this is a transaction that we have went through the last 3 years, and Ranka also knows about this. It's not an easy transaction, even though you have all the documentation, but to put that into an IT system and make that consumer friendly, it's a big exercise. But to be able to look yourself in the eyes afterwards and say that we can trust what we do, it is essential that you have a very good relationship with your partners in the future.
Yeah. And I think that I will, because I think, Anga, you will maybe answer that question as well together with this one, because I think there is some huge considerations for you to have, especially when servicing in the near future companies like Knowledge Cotton. So which considerations have you had in terms of this, and what we know about the EU strategy and coming legislation, and of course retailers coming to ask Knowledge Cotton for all of these informations? What considerations have you had?
I think for now there is unfortunately a lot of misinformation and disinformation about sustainability and cotton production in the market, because it is becoming a quite murky in terms of message that is going to either consumers or even to the industry. That is because there is not a lot of data-based information available. And so it is going to be quite confusing. And then when the legislation come into the picture, the interpretation of legislation, and as such, all this will, will be focused on, while the cotton farmers and textile workers, the focus might, that is my, big worry, whether, they might, get forgotten, because they are at the forgotten end of the long and complex supply chain. So if we, in this kind of environment, if we really have to service and continue, then the long-term relationship with customers, with the right kind of customers, is extremely important for us. And otherwise we will be doing disservice to to, like Anders rightly said, to our commitment to the farmers and to the workers, and whether we can face them next season after season. If we don't deliver what we have committed, whether we can where will they go? Even with the committed value shared operators like us, if we are not able to deliver the impact to the farmers, then who else can do? So then that becomes a big challenge for the cotton farmers. And I come from a cotton farming family. My grandfathers are small scale cotton farmers. So I know how that world will be, or how lonely that world will be. So that is what my worry has always been. And for that, the key solution will be the long-term shared value partnership. And if we have to maintain that, from our end as a supplier, we have to be competitive. We have to be flexible in terms of minimums, and our quality and service should be really world class, not just in the name. So this will be our, I would say, key consideration. And it is still a buyer's market, which means customers have the say in really deciding what we have to do, and they have they could drive what we are doing. And we are lucky, and I would say privileged, to have somebody like Knowledge Cotton and Annas with the right mind shared values for us. And for us, this is like a testament to what we are doing, what we have been doing, and the role or the consideration will continue to be the same. Only my prayer and what I tell internally to all my colleagues is be consistent with this consideration. It is not it is not a trend. It's not a fashion trend that today you provide top quality and then after two seasons, then you can compromise on quality. No, our consideration, whatever is remain top quality, great service, and very good value to what we are providing. And that is what we will continue to have.
So I just need to understand it. What you're actually saying is that you fear that all of this data that all of the customers are gonna want to have, then that will have an effect on the cotton farmers, in a sense that they will be forgotten in all of this. Is that your worry?
I won't say that, because there is no clearly defined, term called sustainability, or there is no clear definition of what sustainability is. So, when somebody talks about transparency, and then they do a little bit of, a lot of them just do something that is required marginally and still calling it sustainable production, and these kind of, and then if somebody wants to promote hemp, then, they villainize cotton, okay, it requires 20,000 liters of water and whatever required, which is unnecessary, I would say. But the problem is, it will be the farmers who will suffer because of this, misinformation and disinformation. Most of the claims that are there in the public domain about cotton, they are not data backed. And they are not recent, they are not data backed, but still that has been, I mean, if you just Google water usage of cotton, you will get tons of information, and 90% of them are wrong.
Yeah.
But that is what will be repeated everywhere, and that is what goes into, somebody who is making a buying decision. Because at the end, when you started talking about it, whatever the buying decision that is made at the brand level that have direct impact on the farmers and workers' life. It is not that, it might have reach in convoluted way. No, it has absolute direct impact. So the decision that they make have absolute direct impact on the farmers and workers. So but to exercise that, what kind of a supply chain, equitable supply chain and transparent supply chain, trustworthy supply chain that you are building, that is whether the whatever legislations and the general fashion industry direction is moving towards providing that or not is my worry. Not really, what will somebody doing transparent information will impact the farmers. No, not at all. It is the misinformation and disinformation that is going around in the industry that is not getting clarified. That is what will impact the farmers.
Yeah, I understand. So I'll just go on to the Q&A if there are any questions from anybody. I just have one final question to both of you, because I also spoke a bit about the certifications role, all of these different standards and certifications. I know both of your companies are certified. I was going to say to a maximum, but you do have quite a few certifications and work with them quite a lot. So can you both maybe explain, Anas, what does that have an effect on your company that you are certified, and how will that be positive or negative for you in the future?
I mean, honestly speaking, yes, we have a lot of certificates, which is good, but I mean, if you have a strong partnership and you share the same values, for me, there's good and bad things in terms of a certification. Yeah. So I would not say that you're just home safe if you have a GOTS certification. But nevertheless, we do have a lot of certification, and we do have that because this has been our belief from the beginning that we as a middle-sized company, we need to be verified from a third party, which is not ourselves. And this is kind of our journey as a brand, that we need to get the things verified as we do. If it comes down to a product level or CO2 emission or whatever it is, it's important for us that it's not us who is claiming that, but it's verified by the third company.
Yeah, it's supporting documentation.
Yeah, exactly. But I would.
Sorry.
But it's a safe choice to have a certification. I don't know if Ranga agrees. He probably do. But there is a lot of miscommunication and mistrust in the world, and many brands can get a certificate if they want. So you're not home safe just by having a GOTS certificate. It comes down to the relationship you have with the partner.
Nice. Ranga, do you have anything to add for that before we wrap up?
No, I totally agree. I think certification is essential, unfortunately, because there is no other suitable alternative available currently. So it is essential, but I would still say certification is just a stepping stone, and that alone is not enough. You should have, the trustworthy relationship. That is what will ensure, because certification is just a tool to deliver certain things. And, if you have a relationship, then you can use certification as a stepping stone to go beyond certification and deliver the impact that you intend to deliver.
Perfect. That, I think, is the perfect way to end this webinar. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining. Rege as well, thank you so much for joining and digging into PLM's role in this. And thank you everyone for joining today. I will hopefully see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Bye.